Hey everybody, I really haven't done a video blog in a while, and I wanted to look at this passage because it really spoke to me and reminded me of the importance of Jesus in our lives in the midst of chaos. And it comes from Matthew 17. It simply reads, "Now after 6 days Jesus took Peter, James, and John his brother, led them up on a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as the light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. Then Peter answered and said to Jesus, 'Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah.' While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. Suddenly a voice came out of heaven, saying, 'This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him.' And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their faces and were greatly afraid. But Jesus came and touched them, and said, 'Arise, and do not be afraid.' And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only." The past couple of days have been a really interesting time in the body of Christ. There have been accusations being tossed to and fro, and it's been kind of ugly. Things have gotten pretty ugly. This passage is kind of a subtle reminder of the place of Jesus in all of this, and the place that he is supposed to take in each of our lives. Jesus comes into this text and takes 3 disciples with him. Takes them up on the Mount of Transfiguration and says, "I want to take you guys up here to show you my glory." Now, in this process, it says that Jesus was transfigured before them. Now, the Greek word for transfigured there is metamorpho. It's where we get the word metamorphosis, and that's the process that caterpillars usually go through to become butterflies. So, literally, Jesus was transformed before them, and it said that he was shining like white. And his garments were white. And then something else happened very peculiar. There were 2 men that showed up. One was Moses and one was Elijah. Now, Moses represented the law and Elijah represented the prophets. So here we are. We have Moses, Elijah, and the Messiah. In fact, Luke talks about how they were talking to Jesus about his departure. The Greek word for that, for departure, is actually Exodus, which, as we all know, Moses led the people of Israel on their Exodus. So the leader of the people of Israel for the Exodus was talking to Jesus about his own Exodus from this earth. And Peter, being the Peter that he is, says, "It is good for us to be here." Now, this version of the text says, "Let us make tents, 3 of them, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But the original text actually says, "I will make." You know how proactive Peter can be sometimes. So he says, "It's good for us to be here. Here's what I'll do. I'll make 3 tents for you. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Now, there are several occasions in the Old Testament where God speaks from heaven. But in the New Testament, there are only a few occasions where God actually speaks from heaven. And each time he says the same thing. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. Hear him." God had to interrupt from heaven because of Peter's mistake, Peter's misunderstanding of the situation. He saw 2 men of God, and he saw Jesus there with them. He was on a high mountain. He was in a high place. He was in a high spiritual atmosphere. So he decided to say, "It's good for us to be here." He put men of God on the same level as Christ. He wanted to build one tabernacle for each one of these people. And the problem is, God says, I have a problem with that. I'm going to break through heaven so you know that Jesus is my son. And not only is he my son, he's the Son of God. He is God in the flesh. This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. And the passage says that they fell on their faces and were afraid. And it goes on to say that Jesus touched them and told them not to be afraid. And then it concludes and says, when they had lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. Oftentimes we can hold men to a higher standard, especially men of God, to a higher standard than we hold ourselves to. We expect them to be perfect. We expect them to deal with situations the way that we expect someone who is perfect to deal with them, the way that Jesus would deal with them. And the fact of the matter is that we all live in this fleshly tent. We're all flesh. We all fall short of God's glory. And the problem comes in where we begin to see men of God on equal footing with Jesus. We begin to build tabernacles to honor individuals and forget about the fact that when all is said and done, when we lift our eyes, we're supposed to see no one but Jesus only. Our salvation shouldn't be tied to another individual. In fact, we also shouldn't mock individuals when they go through processes or when things come up that may show their flawed characteristics. And myself, I'll tell you the truth, I'm not perfect. I'm a man of God. I pride myself on my character and my integrity. But I'm not a perfect individual. In fact, me and my wife had a small disagreement last night. We worked through that, but if I were perfect, we wouldn't have any issues. But we do. And I just hope that we all understand that as human beings, we're all flawed. We all have issues. And as this passage says, sometimes our best intentions go awry, and we can forget sometimes who Jesus is. We all need to get to that place where we hear God's voice from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son. There's none like him. There's none above him. He's Alpha, he's Omega. He's Emmanuel. He's our healer. He is the one we're to look to in times of trouble. Man will fail us. Men are flawed, full of flaws. But there's one who is perfect. There's one who is sinless. There's one who walked this earth that we're to respect, admire, and that we're to lift up higher than all other names. So in the midst of all of this, I want you to remember one thing. When you lift your eyes up, I pray that you only see Jesus the Christ. This has been Brother Preacher. God bless you.